Long, long ago, the great void produced a god and a goddess named Don and Danu. When they looked at each other, a sacred flame burned in their hearts. They locked into a loving embrace from which they could not be separated. After a while, Don and Danu bore children. The children were caught between their interlocked parents and couldn't escape. One of the sons, Brienne, decided that he needed to separate his parents or he and his brothers would die. Danu's love for her son won over her love for her husband, and she allowed Brienne to slay his father. Brienne's fury was so great that he cut his father into 9 parts. Danu was horrified by what she had seen and started to cry. Her tears swelled into a great flood that swept away all of her children to earth. This is how Danu became known as the waters of heaven. The waters also washed away the 9 parts of Don. His head became the skies, his brain the clouds, his face the sun, his mind the moon, his bones the stones, and his breath the wind. Don's blood mixed with Danu's tears and became the seas. 2 red acorns fell to the earth. Danu recognized her beloved in one of them. She cried again, and her tears soaked into the dry earth and made the seeds grow. The red acorn took root and grew into a marvelous oak tree. It was the reincarnation of Don. The other seed became a priest, brother of Don. His name was Finn. Don saw his beloved Danu up in heaven and stretched out his branches to the skies, trying to dry her tears with his leaves. Nurtured by the waters of heaven, the oak grew many berries, which fell and grew into the first humans. The people who grew from these berries were lazy because they couldn't die. Slowly, they became lazier and lazier until they began to rot from the inside. Don asked the advice of his brother Finn. "What people need is death," said he. "There must be renewal in the world." But Don didn't like this idea, and the 2 brothers started to fight. They fought long and hard. Finally, Finn was killed. Seeing his brother dead at his feet, Don was so overcome with pain that his heart burst apart. Parts of his body fell everywhere, and this renewed the world. But death did come to mankind. When Don died, 3 mighty roots of the oak grew deep into the ground, creating the other world, a place where people go after death. Don became the god of the other world, while Danu remained the goddess of heaven. To this day, their great love continues, even as they are separated by the earth. Before anything had a name, before there was firm ground, or sky, or the sun and moon, there was Apsu, the sweet water sea, and Tiamat, the salt water sea. When these 2 seas mingled, they created the gods Lamu and Lahamu, who rose from the silt at the edge of the water. When Lamu and Lahamu joined, they created the great gods Anshar, Kishar, and Anu. From this generation of gods, there arose mighty Ea and his many brothers. Ea and his brothers were restless. They surged over the waters day and night. Neither Apsu nor Tiamat could get any rest. They tried to plead with the gods to tread softly, but powerful Ea didn't hear them. Apsu decided the only way to have some peace was to destroy Ea and his brothers. He began to plot their demise with some of the first-generation gods. But Ea heard of their plans and struck him down first. This began a war among the gods. Tiamat was furious that her mate was killed, and she began producing great and ferocious monsters to slay Ea and his brothers. She created poisonous dragons and demons and serpents. She created the viper, the sphinx, the lion, the Mad Dog, and Scorpion Man. The chief of them all was called Kingu. He led the army of Tiamat's monsters into heaven against Ea and his brothers to avenge Apsu's death. While Tiamat fashioned her army, Ea and the goddess Damkina created the great god Marduk. His eyes flashed with lightning, and when he spoke, he breathed fire. He was fearless and radiant. The gods cowered before him. "You are the great sun," they cried. Ea and the gods told him of the advancing army. They needed his help to defeat them. "I will fight for you, but after the war is over, I shall rule the universe on high." The gods agreed. Marduk made ready for battle. He gathered the 4 winds to clear the path to Tiamat. Marduk burst out of the sky in his flaming chariot, pulled by his team Killer, Crusher, Unyielder, and Fleet. He held the royal scepter and ring covered in golden armor. He rode into battle bearing his bow and arrows and a mighty thunderbolt. Marduk was glorious to behold. He struck fear in the hearts of all Tiamat's brood. The sea waters of Tiamat swirled together and formed a vast and fearsome dragon. She opened her mouth wide to scream. Before she could utter a word, Marduk cast a hurricane into her mouth. She swallowed it, and the hurricane almost burst her apart from the inside. Before she could cast a single spell, Marduk let one of his arrows fly. It cut her neatly in half. Tiamat's monsters trembled as she died. Marduk raised half of her body to the heavens to form the sky, and the other half formed the earth. Marduk was victorious, and now the undisputed king of the universe. No one ever questioned his rule. He created the days of the year, the planets and their paths in the heavens, the stars and their constellations, and the moon and her moods. He became the sun and gave all the gods their responsibilities. After a time, he decided to create a creature that could serve the gods and bear the burden of hard work looking after the earth. Marduk first created a structure from bone left over from the bones of the dead monsters from the war. Then he formed the flesh around it and breathed life into it. Man was given his name. He took up residence on the earth while the gods ascended to heaven. Thus the gods were freed from eternal labor.
Before the earth had form, there was Kotliku, the earth mother. She swam in the chaotic waters in the darkness before time. She created the moon and the stars, called the Senson Hotsnahwa. She had a daughter, the earth goddess Koyol Tsao-ki. Her children ascended to the heavens to live and rule the sky. One day, Kotliku found a ball of hummingbird feathers. She tucked them into her dress for safekeeping. After a while, she discovered that she was pregnant. Her children in heaven were ashamed of their mother. "Who is the father of this child?" they demanded. It was a ball of hummingbird feathers, but no one believed her story. Her children decided to slay their mother for the great shame and dishonor she brought them. Kotliku heard the news that her children were coming to slay her. She was terrified and tried to run. She could already see them advancing towards her over the hills. "Do not be afraid. I am ready," came a voice from the unborn child. It was then that she gave birth to the fiery sun god Huitzilopochtli. He emerged fully armed, bearing his burning sword Sukovo. With one stroke, he slew the angry earth goddess Koyol Tsao-ki and sent her body tumbling towards the chaotic seas. The top half of her body went into the heavens, and the lower half crashed into the seas, forming the earth. After this, Huitzilopochtli went up to the heavens to rule over the moon and the stars, and Kotliku descended below the earth to ensure that the earth bore fruit. It was one of her sons, Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who created the first humans. He created a race from men from gray ash. At first, the earth gave its riches freely for the new race of men. Their lives were easy, and they lived without pain and suffering. After a while, however, these men became greedy. They forgot to honor their creators and took the earth's riches for granted. Quetzalcoatl became enraged and decided to wash them all away in a great flood. Only one couple was not greedy, a husband and wife named Teta and Nena. Quetzalcoatl decided to spare these two and gave them instructions. Find the tallest and strongest hollow tree, hide in it, and you shall live. Take only one cob of corn with you and no more. Teta and Nena did as they were told. Quetzalcoatl sent the waters crashing down over his creations. The greedy men and women turned into fish and are still fish today. Teta and Nena survived as Quetzalcoatl promised. They repopulated the world with a new race of men, humble and always aware of the gods who created them. But Kotleku, the Earth Mother, was no longer as generous with this earth's riches as before. She became known as the Grandmother, wearing a skirt made of serpents, a necklace made of human hands and hearts, and adorned with a skull. Her hands and feet were decorated with animal claws. She became insatiably hungry for human blood and demanded regular human sacrifice. Thus, humans had to give her one living human heart each year. If they didn't, Kotleku would withdraw the earth gifts, and everyone on earth would die of starvation. All was darkness in the time before time. The dark land was called Ilba-Lintia, and it possessed nothing save an endlessly tall pole coming out of the ground. It stretched from the barren land to the top of the heavens above. At the base of the pole, Ka-Ro-Ra lay in the thick night asleep. While all around him was deep blackness, his dreams were as bright and colorful as the world we know today. He was dreaming of bandicoots, and that the creatures were coming out of his navel, his armpits, his nose, and mouth. Suddenly dawn arose, and Ilba-Lintia was flooded with light for the first time. Ka-Ro-Ra rose from where he had been sleeping. He had been sleeping for a long, long time, and he was tired and hungry. He grabbed 2 bandicoots and cooked them in the hot sun. After he had eaten, he realized he was lonely. The sun covered itself with necklaces and sunk below the horizon. Ka-Ro-Ra went back to sleep. This time he dreamed of a bull roaring, which appeared from his armpit. This turned into a young boy, whom he sang to life. By day, father and son hunted for bandicoots. By night, as they slept, the father dreamed of more and more sons. Each morning he woke up to find twice as many as the night before. By day, Ka-Ro-Ra and all of his sons ate bandicoots and cooked them in the sun. It wasn't long before the land had run out of bandicoots. Ka-Ro-Ra sent his sons further and further out to hunt, but they only returned hungry in the evenings. The bandicoots were gone. One morning they heard a strange noise and saw a dark animal in the misty light. Thinking it might be a bandicoot, the sons attacked it.
I'm no bandicoot. I am Chen-Ter-Ama, a man just like yourselves. Now you have made me lame.
Chen-Ter-Ama was the first of the kangaroos. That evening, all of Ka-Ro-Ra's sons gathered around him. From the hole in the ground where Ka-Ro-Ra slept, there came a flood of honey, which engulfed the entire land of Ilba-Lintia. All at once, Ka-Ro-Ra's sons were swept away, along with Chen-Ter-Ama the kangaroo. They were all washed underground and out of sight. Ka-Ro-Ra was left standing by the great pole. Ka-Ro-Ra went back to sleep to dream